An Eye for an Eye. Part 8. The golden Emperor Hylexan and his horde of tentacled monsters cornered the circus folk and the terrified Quilax. Danica fired an energy blast at the Emperor, which it effortlessly deflected, but in doing so, the energy was scattered into its minions, knocking many of them back for a few seconds. Danica then pushed the others back into the cell, which she closed over behind her, stopping a few Hylexans in their tracks. After performing a quick enchantment, she then opened the door, which now led to the lower levels of the Emperor's palace. The Emperor screamed out in rage and struck several of its minions.
"Find them! All of our work cannot have been for nothing!"
"Well done, Danica," the circus master said.
"I don't understand,"
Carleen asked. "It's simple. The prison works through magic, like everything else on this ship. It has no fixed point. Its door can open wherever the Emperor wants it to, so I just briefly took it over and took us to the floor the circus was on. I was only able to do it because the Emperor had been weakened by the circus master," Danica explained.
"How do you know where the tent is?"
Ashley asked. "I can sense it," Danica replied, before being distracted by something at the edge of the corridor. Danica could sense something else near to them, something twisted and broken by magic. The nearer she got to it, the more it was almost painful for her. Danica soon saw what it was when she peered into a room at the end of the corridor. Several Hylexan scientists were gathered around a massive dark energy ball, similar to the pit, only much more dangerous.
"Unbelievable,"
Danica said.
"The magics they're playing with, they're among the most destructive I've ever seen." "Why are they even bothering with them?"
Ashley asked.
"They've already destroyed most of the Quilax. No other species in this galaxy even has magic. What could they possibly need that for?"
"I suspect the war isn't going to end with just the Quilax," the circus master said. "If you run out of enemies, just create more. A lot of their soldiers wouldn't know what to do if there was no one for them to fight."
Sadly, the circus master wasn't just being poetic. He had heard of the Hylexans before, even if he had been lucky enough never to encounter them. He knew all too well what the monsters would go on to do, however, and also knew tragically there was nothing he could do to stop it from starting here. "We need to move past them. That dark magic they're playing with is so unpredictable. A fight could set it off," Danica said. The circus folk and the last of the Quilax slowly crept down the corridor. Along the way, they saw other magical experiments to create new kinds of weapons in other rooms.
"Amateurs,"
the circus master thought to himself. The Hylexans' weapons took the form of magical energy rather than physical weapons. The energy would then be fused onto their bodies to make sure that each Hylexan soldier would never be left helpless. Each form of energy, however, naturally had to be perfected before it would be fused with the soldiers' bodies. Finally, at the very end of the corridor, the circus folk could see a room containing the tent, though by this stage it was a mere shell of its former self. So much of the magic in the vessel had been drained or damaged, it looked battered and torn. It was surrounded by several Hylexan scientists, who were clearly puzzled at the strange craft that looked so delicate, yet was so powerful.
"That doesn't look like it will be able to take anyone anywhere,"
Askiro said.
"She's been through worse," the circus master said proudly. "Trust me, once we fix her up a bit with some magic, she'll be back to her old self. You won't want to leave."
Danica placed a barrier around the door behind them. It probably wouldn't hold back any Hylexans for longer than a few seconds, but that might be all they need. The presence of her magic being used so near, however, instantly alerted the Hylexans around the circus, who reached their tentacles out for the Quilax. Such was their hatred of their old enemies, they would always go for them first, regardless. Carline was the first to attack the monsters. She jumped on top of one of the octopoids and then proceeded to beat the magical alien to the ground. The nearest Hylexan turned its attention from the Quilax and tried to strike Carline with its tentacle, but Carline caught its tentacle and swung the monster around, making it knock the other two monsters out of the air. Florence, the circus master, the strange boy and Danica started to attack the other monsters before they could retaliate. The circus master impaled one of the monsters with his clawed hand, whilst Danica repeatedly blasted another into a nearby wall. Florence, meanwhile, was ensnared by one of the Hylexans' tentacles, but she bit into the one that wrapped itself around her throat and tore it off. Whilst the monster was in pain, the siren jumped at the Hylexan and stuck both of her hands through the monster's amorphous body. The strange boy, meanwhile, jumped on one of the Hylexans and rammed it into another, pushing them against a wall. The strange boy then tore both monsters to pieces with his claws, shredding through one and then the other in a matter of seconds. Keptis and Ashley just watched from the sides, along with the Quilax. They both hated feeling so helpless. Normally, Keptis could keep up with the others thanks to his magical weapons. He was a skilled fighter, of course, but in this instance it would do no good against the Hylexans. Ashley, meanwhile, had felt like a load throughout the entire mission, despite the bravery she had shown against the Hylexans. If they got out of this, she was going to make sure that Carline and Danica taught her more skills and tricks. After the last of the monsters were destroyed, the circus master and Danica headed towards the circus.
"It's shielded by their magic," the circus master said. "How long do you think before you can break it down?"
"A few minutes," Danica replied. The circus master didn't want to use the toxic magics he was currently holding, as they could damage the tent as well. Suddenly, Carline noticed the Hylexan that Danica had attacked had survived. The monster slowly crawled along the floor towards a large, green, glowing sphere on the nearby wall. Carline jumped on the monster, but one of its tentacles whipped out and hit the sphere, which sent an alarm running throughout the entire base. All of the Hylexan scientists from the nearby rooms, who had been too busy with their own experiments to take heed of the Emperor's warning before, soon swamped the Quilax and the circus folk. They effortlessly tore down Danica's barrier and began to attack the Quilax. Some of the creatures even wielded the crude weapons which they had been developing in their labs, which took the form of magical spheres. Carline, the strange boy, Florence and the circus master tried to fight off the Hylexans, but there were too many of them. Carline was hit by one of the monster's new weapons, a purple sphere which covered her in a purple field. The vampire tried to break free, but the magic was too strong. Ashley and Askira tried to pull the magical shield off Carline, and after a few minutes the magic, which had seemed almost unbreakable, became brittle and crumbled to nothing.
"It needs more work done on it,"
the Hylexan who had thrown the weapon at Carline said. Another Hylexan had managed to fire a yellow energy beam at the strange boy, which briefly placed him under the Hylexan's control. The strange boy then jumped Florence from behind and stuck his hand through her spine and into her stomach. The circus master tried to restrain the child vampire and pull him off, but the Jiangxi breed were far stronger than the circus master's breed of vandal, and with one smack the strange boy sent the circus master flying across the room, where several Hylexans started to swarm him. The strange boy brought Florence to her knees, but fortunately the effects of the magic began to wear off. Before he and Florence could do anything else, however, they were hit by a green ray from another Hylexan that began to burn their flesh. Florence's flesh burned much quicker than the strange boy, though neither of them were able to break free from the magics. Fortunately, Danica was able to pull them free, though only after an immense struggle. Florence, however, was still badly burned and too weak to fight back afterwards. Another one of the Hylexans fired at Danica, knocking her out of the air, whilst Keptis tried to drag Florence to safety. The circus master, who had managed to fight the Hylexans that had swarmed him off meanwhile, quickly joined the strange boy, and the two would continue to defend the Martian and the Siren for the next few minutes against the monsters. A few of the Quilax, including Askira, tried to join in the fight and help Carline, who was holding the monsters off from the main crowd, but they were no match for the Hylexans. Several more Quilax were impaled by the Hylexans' tentacles. Danica, meanwhile, managed to finally open the circus and used her magic to first pull Keptis, Florence and Ashley into the tent, and then all of the Quilax, whilst the circus master, Carline and the strange boy either fought off or distracted the octopoid monsters. As the two vampires and the vandal prepared to join the others in the tent, the roof began to cave in, and several more Hylexans and the Golden Emperor, whose flesh had completely healed, descended. The Emperor knew it was risky to take the circus master on when he had the Hylexans, but his pride meant that he couldn't leave it entirely to his minions. The Emperor hoped that his minions would deal with the vandal, but if he didn't at least make an appearance, then he feared he would look like a coward to his people and the rest of the galaxy. The Hylexan minions distracted the three time-travellers long enough for the Emperor to wrap its tentacles around them. Both of the circus master's claws were restrained by the tentacle, preventing him from using the Hylexans.
"Interesting," the Emperor said. "Most life forms would be burnt to a crisp, yet you still struggle. I respect your strength. Hand over the Quilax, and I'll spare you."
The circus master laughed.
"Let's stop pretending this is about them. It was once, but now... Relax, the cameras are off. Why not admit that you're way beyond just simple revenge?"
The Emperor froze for a minute before answering.
"We have eliminated the monsters who once enslaved us, but that doesn't mean there won't be others around the universe. These weapons are to make sure that we will never be vulnerable again."
"How will you get complete reassurance, I wonder? Are you really going to let those weapons just go to waste?"
the circus master replied. The Emperor squeezed his three prisoners harder.
"We don't have to explain anything to you,"
the monster shouted.
"We will protect ourselves by any means necessary."
In desperation, Carline bit into the Emperor's tentacles. It was unquestionably the most unpleasant thing she had ever tasted, but she bit as hard as she could until she severed the tentacle that was holding her. The Emperor, in its distress, loosened its grip on the others, who were able to break free. Danica then came flying out of the tent and started to blast the Emperor holding him back, while Carline, the strange boy and the circus master did their best to fight the other Hylexans off. The Emperor, however, soon overpowered the witch, before starting to attack the others, who barely managed to dodge its tentacles, except for the circus master, who tried to scratch the beast to infect it with the Hylexans. Instead of even attempting to fight the circus master, however, the Emperor sent several of its minions to dogpile on the vandal. Outside, whilst Carline and the strange boy were preoccupied with the Hylexans, Ashley emerged from the tent with Keptis and threw several knives at the Hylexans swarming the circus master. She only managed to hit 2 of them, but it was enough for the circus master to get free. Florence, meanwhile, having healed soon, followed the others out of the tent and jumped straight onto the Emperor from behind, who in his panic flailed madly around, with one of his tentacles striking several of his own minions, who were vaporized as a result. Seizing his chance, the circus master jumped over the Hylexans, attacking him, and onto the Emperor, and stabbed both of his clawed hands into the monster, injecting the Hylexan into its blood. The Emperor let out a final scream before the Hylexan ran its way through his body. Within a matter of seconds, the Emperor's flesh turned completely grey, and his entire body began to shatter. The entire base afterwards instantly began to shake and collapse. The circus master, weak from the Hylexans, collapsed into the ruins of the former emperor. The other circus folk tried to reach the circus master, but the hordes of Hylexans started to beat and impale the circus master with their tentacles. Just as all seemed lost, the Quilax suddenly came running from the tent. Close to 200 of them, they all swarmed the Hylexans. Having watched the fight from within the tent, they felt they couldn't leave the circus folk at the mercy of those monsters another second. The Quilax predictably didn't last long against the Hylexans, but they at least distracted them long enough for Carline and Danica to get to the circus master. Carline fought the Hylexans that had gathered around him off, whilst Danica used her magic to get the circus master back to the safety of the tent. Danica would then start to pull the Quilax back to the tent too, whilst the rest of the circus folk held off the Hylexans. More and more pieces of rubble started to fall from the ceiling as the space castle broke apart, crushing the Hylexans. One piece nearly hit Ashley, but the strange boy managed to push her out of the way in time, much to Ashley's surprise. The remaining circus folk then escaped back to the tent as even the Hylexans began to flee to escape their dying ship. Back in the tent, the circus master sprang to his feet, almost as if being in the tent restored him, and activated the ship to take off, mere seconds before the Emperor's palace exploded. The blast was seen all over the Hylexans' planet below. It was a day that would live in infamy for their race for thousands of years to come. The day that should have been their ultimate victory over the hated Quilax, but instead led to their greatest tragedy, where the Hylexans who had won the war for them were slaughtered. None of the Hylexan army escaped the exploding ship. The Emperor, meanwhile, was remembered as the greatest hero of the Hylexan people for centuries to come, with all subsequent emperors being forced to live in his shadow to some extent. The Quilax, on the other hand, would have a very different destiny. The tent managed to take them to a far-away planet, hundreds and thousands of light-years beyond the Hylexans' reach. The journey thankfully only took a few hours. The fewer than 200 surviving Quilax were rather cramped in the tent, to say the least. Many of them, including Asciro, had also been badly injured by the Hylexans. Danica was able to heal most of the injured with her magic, but sadly not all of the Quilax made the journey. The planet the tent took the surviving Quilax to was a beautiful jungle world. It was the only inhabited world in its solar system, and other than the plant life, there were only a few primitive animal life forms. It was the perfect place for their race to start over. The circus folk would stay with the survivors for a few days. During that time, they helped to bury those who had died on the journey, and using Danica's magic, built a few settlements to house the survivors. Eventually, after a few days, however, the circus folk knew they had to move on. They tried to slip away in secret, but Asciro noticed them all leaving and followed the circus folk to the tent.
"You could have said goodbye," Asciro said to Carline, somewhat jokingly.
"Sorry, darling, but we have other worlds to visit," Carline responded. "Yes," the circus master interrupted. "It's not easy being a hero, you know. We're constantly on the move, risking our lives to save others," he continued to boast, to the embarrassed moans of his teammates.
"I understand, but I just want to thank you one last time," Asciro replied, ignoring the circus master's boasts. "Don't thank us," Carline said. "We just did what anyone would have done, darling." "Well, a little thanks is okay," the circus master interrupted. "Still," he continued, in a more serious tone, "it's important now that you use this second chance for your race. The Hylexans may be monsters now, but they didn't spring out of nowhere." "I know," Asciro said with regret. "I'm still not sure we deserve this second chance."
"That's entirely up to you, darling,"
Carleen said.
When we were in that city, you told me about how ashamed you were of what your people had done. Well, now you can prove it. Make sure that you focus on your own people now.
That's easier said than done. Some of us are already talking about revenge, about using magic as a weapon, Askira said.
Well, we never said that rebuilding a civilization was going to be easy. All races are capable of great evil. You've seen where it leads, not only with your own race, but with the Hylexans. Always make sure to remind your people of that, the circus master said.
I will. I promise.
Maybe we'll come back in a couple of 100 years, see how your descendants are doing,
the circus master said with a smile, as he and the others went back into the tent. Carleen was the last to leave. She shook Askira's hand one last time and wished her luck before joining her comrades. In a matter of seconds, the battered old tent vanished back into the vortex before the amazed Askira.
Do you really think they'll really be able to change?
Ashley asked.
I don't know. It's always so much easier when you're making the history of your own planet,
the circus master replied, as he and Danica set about trying to repair the tent.
For all I know, they could go on to become the greatest advocates for peace this part of the galaxy has ever known, or they could become even worse than before, as now they know about magic, and thanks to us, they have been given the perfect little isolated corner of the galaxy to practice and learn.
The circus master sighed. For all we know, a later mission could see us have to take on the monsters we created today, Danica interrupted, whilst not even looking at Ashley. She was seemingly absorbed in trying to patch up a part of the tent. Her callousness shocked Ashley.
How can you possibly live like this, not knowing if what you're doing is the right thing? That you could be deciding the fates of billions of people, entire worlds?
Ashley asked.
That's because we're not deciding the fates of entire worlds, the circus master replied. All we are doing is stopping something evil from happening right now, in what is the present for us. Whatever the Quilax do with the rest of their lives, that's not on us. All I know is that what the Hylexans were doing to them was wrong. If we hadn't stopped that when we could, then that would have been on our heads.
Ashley still wasn't completely convinced by the circus master's words. Even the vandal himself still had doubts, but she felt it wasn't best to push it. A lot of work had to be done on the tent right now, and at the very least, Ashley did know that the Hylexans were monsters, and that setting them back was a good thing. Danica was at the very least able to conjure up both the television and video game system.
Turns out you're not that bad after all,
Carleen said. Yes, but it might be a long journey, and the last thing I want is you guys moaning about how there's nothing to do, Danica replied, as the tent sped off through time and space to its next destination, wherever that would be.